Welcome once again, ladies and gents, to another edition of 7th grade social studies. We're continuing our study on the Protestant Reformation. So try and keep up with me. Going to go a little fast this time around, but hey, you've got a note-taking guide, so just hang on and follow along for the ride. I'm going to talk about the spread and the impact of the Reformation. Europe is going to go through several changes, both religious, political, and geographic. Over here, we've got a little graphic organizer to kind of give you a visual of what's going on here. We've got Christianity that started out with Jesus and his followers coming down this road, and it begins to branch off into two different divisions. So let's take a quick look. One thing I forgot to mention last time was the whole word Protestant, and that is the correct way to say it. It's Protestant, not Protestant. That's how I used to pronounce it in middle school until one of my teachers corrected me. Basically, your Protestants were the people that were having these arguments with the Catholic Church because they saw issues that they wanted fixed. Remember the selling of indulgences and simony. They wanted reform. And when that didn't happen, they began to protest. So that's why we get the word, that's why we have the word Protestants. Remember, our friend Martin Luther was excommunicated from the Catholic Church in 1521. Think of excommunicated as just being isolated from communication. Just imagine not being around friends and family because of your religious and personal beliefs. That's what happened to Martin Luther. So he started his own brand or sect of Christianity called Lutheranism, and he had the support of several German princesses within the Holy Roman Empire. And we'll take a look at a map to refresh your memory on what the Holy Roman Empire looked like. So, with the start of Protestantism, this led to a war between Catholics and Protestants within the Holy Roman Empire that lasted 30 years. Now remember, these people believe pretty much the same thing, they just have some differences. Anyway, 30 years later, they come to an agreement with the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. Basically, this allowed each prince or the minor kingdoms within the Holy Roman Empire to choose if they wanted to be Catholic or Protestant. So that was a pretty big deal. One of the first instances of religious freedom, so to speak, in history. Once again, over here, we've got the map. You guys remember this from the handout that you received. Here's the Holy Roman Empire. This is Wittenberg up here, where Martin Luther is living. There's Augsburg, around the Peace of Augsburg that we just looked at. Now, Martin Luther's Reformation had a huge impact on the rest of Europe. If you look over here to the right, you can see the spread of it. So, starting in Wittenberg, it spread into northern Europe. We've got areas of Denmark, and then crossing over into Scandinavia with Norway and Sweden, moves into Eastern Europe with Poland, and even to Western Europe, further Western Europe with England and Scotland. So that was a pretty big deal because at this time period, Europe was predominantly Catholic. All right, a couple other big players in the Protestant Reformation. Going to take a quick look at them. One of these characters is John Calvin. He's a French humanist that lived in Geneva, Switzerland. Remember, once again, that was on the map. If we take a look back, right over here is Geneva in Switzerland. So John Calvin wrote this book called Institutes of Christian Religion. It was hugely popular and influential, continuing these ideas of the Protestant Reformation. Calvin's beliefs were slightly different from Martin Luther's. He believed that God chose a group of people known as the elect, and that these people were saved to live a holy lifestyle. One way he believed that people could tell the difference was if they were successful in life or in business. If they had success, he was just, hey, that's God's way of showing you that you are one of the elect. John also attempted to establish a theocratic state in Geneva. You remember from our study in culture from Unit 1, a theocracy is a government that is ran by an individual who believes that he's been chosen by God to rule. In John Calvin's case, he believed that the Bible was the final authority and that the city of Geneva should be ran from a biblical perspective, a biblical point of view. So basically, the laws of the Bible were pretty much almost the laws of the entire town. At this time when John Calvin was preaching, there was a Scotsman known as John Knox who took these same ideas to Scotland, and we're going to see his influence a little bit later on in this video. Moving right along, I want to talk about the scandalous King Henry VIII. My guys, you know about all the scandals that happened at King Henry's court, how he was just quite the character. I mean, right on par with Keeping Up with the Kardashians and the housewives, the Real Housewives of Orange County or Atlanta or whatever, saucy shows that you watch. King Henry was one of those characters. But at the beginning of his reign, he was considered and called the defender of the faith by the Pope because at the beginning he denounced Martin Luther's preachings and teachings on these Protestant ideas. And so the Catholics were quite fond of King Henry. But King Henry had his own ideas in mind. He pretty much embraced Protestantism because of his of personal and political reasons. Personal reasons, for one, he wanted a divorce from his first wife. Remember, he had six, Catherine of Aragon. Now, the Pope rejected Henry's plea because, for one, Catherine did no wrong, and Henry honestly just wanted a male heir. And we know he never really received one from Catherine because the one boy that they had died. And so Henry, in a fit of rage, and just because he was a little bit of a whiner, in my opinion, wanted his own way, he decided to force Catherine and start his own church, known as the Anglican Church, which is still there today in England. So this gave Henry a huge advantage because now he was not only king, but he was also the head of his own church in England. Along with that, he no longer had to share power with the Pope, and so he closed all the Catholic monasteries and confiscated all their money and possessions. So in Henry's case, it was a win-win. That was the entire reason he embraced Protestantism. As a matter of fact, the Anglican Church in England was pretty much almost identical to the Catholic Church. I know, a little odd, but Henry just wanted things his way. That's what we like to call an ego. Moving right along, come to his daughter, the lovely Queen Elizabeth I of England. Just like her father, she wasn't a very religious person either. However, Elizabeth was doing it for mainly political reasons. She wanted to avoid a civil war in England because at this time there was still a pretty big segment of the Catholic population that lived in England. So in order to avoid civil war, she decided to consolidate her power by embracing Protestantism. So the way she did this was by requiring an oath by all her subjects, primarily the clergy, meaning your bishops and priests and preachers. They had to swear allegiance to the queen as the supreme ruler of the church. This way, the queen was able to be both the ruler in the political realm and in the religious realm. Those that didn't were either dismissed from their positions, and at different points during her reign, they actually tortured or killed those that refused to swear allegiance to the queen. Those that decided, hey, we're going to remain loyal to the Pope and the Catholic Church, life wasn't so friendly for them. It wasn't a huge number, somewhere in the arena of about 300, but nevertheless, the queen was not someone you wanted to cross. As a result of her embracing these Protestant ideas, England then became predominantly a Protestant nation. And this is a pretty huge impact that you're going to see later on through this course, and definitely when you get to the 8th grade. All right, we're actually going to leave the key differences between Catholics and Protestants for discussion in class, so we're going to just skip over this slide, and we'll talk about that more in class. Couple things we want to talk about here, just to sum this video up, were the different results or the impact of the Reformation. Now, during the 16th and 17th centuries, Protestants and Catholics went toe-to-toe, went head-to-head, having these wars over their beliefs. And surprisingly, well, I guess it really isn't a surprise, not only were they fighting each other, but they began to fight or persecute other groups that were different sects or denominations of Christianity. So not only are they fighting each other, but they're fighting other groups within Christianity. It got so bad that in France, between the years of 1562 and 1598, over 1 million people died. So this religious war was a pretty big deal. There's the 30 Years' War that happened in Germany, but that was over both political and religious regions. And so they just could never come to a peace agreement. They just couldn't see eye to eye on who was right and who was wrong. Finally, in 1648, with the Peace of Westphalia, they finally decided, hey, you know what? We're just going to have to agree to disagree. And so this peace treaty actually set up boundaries between both Protestant and Catholic lands. And we'll take a look at that on the next slide. In order for you to view this map a little bit better, might want to maximize your screen just a little bit. See over here in the pink, we've got Lutheranism. So Martin Luther's ideas spread to North Germany and Northern Europe and Scandinavia once again. The orange part is predominantly Catholic, so the Catholics still had a pretty solid hold in Europe. Remember our friend Mr. John Calvin? His brand of Christianity was called Calvinism, and it spread to Eastern Europe and right in Central Europe and Northern Europe. And then John Knox, remember, that was in Geneva, Switzerland. He took those ideas to Scotland. And last but not least, we've got King Henry and Queen Elizabeth that started their brand of Christianity known as the Church of England or the Anglican Church. So, taking a look at Christianity today, you can see the different branches of Christianity. Remember, at the beginning, there was just one church, the Roman Catholic Church. It branched out in Eastern Orthodox, which you guys are going to get at the high school level. And then we've got the Anglican Church up here, Calvinism, and Protestantism. So even today, this is a pretty small list of the different denominations that are out there in Christianity, but it's all different now. All is a direct result of the Protestant Reformation. So next time, you guys, we're going to start to delve into the age of exploration. Going to take a look at how different explorers took their brand of Christianity all over the world and how that is still impacting us to this day. You'll find out more about the Puritans, the Mayflower and all that goodness in the 8th grade, and so much more. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. And of course, for those of you who wanted to know, of course, I had to cite my sources. We don't want to steal anyone's copyrighted material. See you next time.